Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to say a few words about Europe's climate and energy policies. As you probably know, climate and energy are central issues in the European Union's objectives for 2020. By the end of this decade, the 27 member states have committed themselves to jointly reduce the EU's greenhouse gas emissions by 20% below 1990 levels. This is part of a package with two other targets: raising the share of renewable sources in our energy mix to 20% and improving energy efficiency by 20%. It is increasingly recognized across the world that climate and energy policies are closely interconnected, and that changing our energy use is of key importance to reduce emissions. Burning fossil fuels accounts for about 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. What is worse, these emissions are still rising. The International Energy Agency calculated that in 2010, global emissions were the highest in history. The most cost-efficient way to reduce emissions is using less energy, by improving the energy efficiency of our industries, cars and households. So, how do we do this in the EU? Let me give 3 examples. For cars, we have adopted targets. By 2015, average emissions of newly registered cars must be below 130 grams per kilometre. And these targets do work. Since the legislation was proposed in 2007, emissions have gone down by more than 11%. Recently, also targets for vans were adopted, so vehicles are getting more and more fuel efficient, and that is certainly appreciated by consumers and contributes to fighting climate change. Road transport, nevertheless, is currently still responsible for about 1/5 of Europe's emissions. Industrial and power plants is my second example. They are by far the biggest source of emissions in Europe. These are covered by the European Emission Trading System, also known under its abbreviation ETS. The ETS imposes a cap on big emitters and puts a price on emitting carbon. In this way, it's beneficial to improve your company's energy efficiency. If you emit less, you can sell the surplus emission allowances on a carbon market and make money. A third big sector where we need to reduce energy consumption and emissions are buildings. The technology is available to drastically reduce the energy use and to turn our buildings into zero-emission buildings. By 2020, all new buildings will have to meet these standards. But also our existing building stock needs to be retrofitted if we want to achieve our climate goals. Also in Hungary, there is a big scope for improvement in this field. It's important to remember that the European budget is there to support local authorities and private owners in Central and Eastern Europe to do these investments. The European Investment Bank, for example, gave loans to homeowner associations in Lithuania and Estonia to improve the energy efficiency of their old apartment blocks. In the next budget, from 2014 onwards, which was just proposed by the Commission, the money available for climate will raise significantly to about 20% of the overall budget, which is 4 times today's figure. In the next years to come, we certainly need a big increase in the scope and the pace of energy efficiency measures across all sectors. Recent Commission estimates suggest that the EU is on course to achieve only half of the 20% objective we set ourselves for 2020. We need to act now to get back on track, and that's why the Commission just proposed some new measures in the Energy Efficiency Directive. We count on you parliamentarians to get these measures adopted and implemented as soon as possible. Because let's not forget, this is not only about combating climate change. This is also about saving costs, improving the competitiveness of our industry, and getting less dependent on imports of oil and gas from outside the EU. And that brings me to the second subject I would like to talk about today, renewable energy. The IPCC, the UN body that brings together climate scientists from across the world, just published an important report about renewable energy. The report confirms that global emissions could be cut by around a third if we used more wind, solar and biomass. Contrary to fossil fuels, all countries have access to one or several renewable energy sources. There seems to be an enormously untapped reserve, and the sector is rapidly growing. Nearly half of the electricity capacity that was added in 2009 came from renewable energy. This confirms what we are seeing in the EU. The member states expect to more than double their joint renewable energy consumption from 103 million in 2005 to 217 million tonnes oil equivalent in 2020. Hungary and many other member states are planning to exceed even their targets for 2020. But an important condition for this to be achieved is to complete the transposition of the Renewable Energy Directive. And member states also need to ensure that the regulatory framework is in place to attract the necessary private investment in this sector. Renewable energy represents a big potential for economic growth. In just 5 years, 330,000 new jobs were added in this sector. If we stick to our 2020 targets, we have the potential of creating another 1.5 million net jobs all over Europe, not only in renewable energy industry, but also in companies developing new energy efficient technologies or in the construction sector. To sum up, renewable energy and energy efficiency contribute to the EU's emissions going down. Since 1990, CO2 emissions have gone down by around 16%. If we want to keep global warming under control, Europe must reduce its domestic emissions by 80% by 2050. This spring, the Commission presented pathways on how to get us there in the roadmap for moving to competitive and a low-carbon economy in 2050. If we want to achieve this target in a cost-efficient way, we need to cut emissions by 40% by 2030 and by 60% by 2040. So, it's in our own interest to start preparing for this low-carbon future now. The longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. If we act now, we can stay ahead of the pack and profit from the benefits that the transition to a low-carbon economy brings along in terms of jobs, innovation and reduced energy costs. Thank you very much.